You might be wondering why we're called the Rookh Quartet. Well, maybe Andy would like to explain.
We're called the Rookh Quartet because when we originally formed, we got together just to play through repertoire, to challenge ourselves, and to have a bit of fun playing quartets. Really, we didn't actually plan to do any concerts. We were rehearsing in the concert hall at the University of Glasgow, and when someone dropped out of their autumn concert series, they asked whether we could step in to take their place. So we had already been talking to Jane Stanley, who's a composer at the university, about writing a quartet anyway. She had written a piece for me a couple of years before called Lalla Rookh, which is based on a letter from Lord Kelvin, the physicist, who came up with the Kelvin temperature scale and who was a lecturer at Glasgow University. He was a natural horn player as well. He used to start off his physics lectures on sound waves by playing the harmonic series on his natural horn, which is in the Hunterian Museum, which is the room above the concert hall. So the letter that it's based on was written whilst he was on a boat called the Lalla Rookh, and that's where it came from. So Jane then wrote a piece for horn and speaker, which then she changed into natural horn to modern horns and speaker. So Ian provided the voice of Lord Kelvin, and then it went on from there. So we had plans, originally we planned to play the whole piece in this concert now, but Jane sort of realised that when she'd heard it live a couple of times before, she'd come away with other ideas about what she'd like to do with it. So she'd rewritten a big section of it. So we had then played through that, and then she'd had a few more ideas, gone away to examine it again. And in the end, we felt that the piece is evolving so much, which has been really interesting to be part of and to see. But she wanted to take a bit more time over it. So we figured that actually putting together a little selection of excerpts from each one and asking Jane to introduce them all and talk about how she wrote them, how she came up with the ideas would be quite interesting. So instead of the piece, the Lalla Rookh, you've got the evolution of 4 versions of the Lalla Rookh. And hopefully we can tempt you to come and join us for the final version when that's ready at some point soon. How did you go about mixing the words and the horn?
So that was easier because it was more about interspersing and having a commentary between, sort of a dialogue between you and the speaker.
My dear Elizabeth, I believe you heard that I intended to sail from Falmouth to Madeira. The Lalla Rookh has done well.
I mean, I did research a lot and spoke to you. We worked through ideas, and I learned about the natural horn by meeting with you, and you demonstrated a number of techniques. So I was really just thinking about that in my mind. And also I was thinking about the imagery in the text. And again, this idea of anchoring and things which are anchored. So musically, how you can represent this idea of a boat being anchored in a bay.
When I came to Madeira, it never seemed possible that such an idea could enter my mind. Or that this life could bring me any happiness.
That's how I went about structuring the music, at least, was thinking it was very freely composed, but it was identifying different moods and emotions and ideas in the text and trying to characterize those somehow.
When I came away in July, I did not think happiness possible for me. but I carried away an image and impression from which the idea came. And before I'd landed in Dover in October, I had begun to wish for it.
So to showcase things that the natural horn could do. So the singing and playing section at the end was me trying to sort of explore that as a technique.
That's interesting as well, because there are times in there where there's you're singing a semitone higher than you're playing, which means that you get this sort of beating against it. You don't get a pure note, and so some of the intervals really ring on the whole horn. Suddenly you get all these overtones, and then some of them are really bare, and then others are really fighting against each other. So it's quite a weird mix of ways of sounds that you get within the same line, which is quite hard to control.
I hadn't heard the solo piece version before, and I can hear so much of the quartet version and vice versa in it, which is really, really interesting.
My dear Elizabeth, I believe you heard that I intended to sail from Falmouth for Madeira on the 2nd of May. The Lalla Rookh has done well, taking me to the island 1,200 sea miles from Falmouth.
It's so different listening to it than playing it. It's such a different experience.
So in what way?
I don't get the full effect at all. I think because I'm so focused on keeping where I am in relation to the other two players at the right time, I don't get to enjoy like that mix of sounds and like the way that the sounds play off against each other.
It's strange, isn't it? Because you hear, listening now, you really feel everything doing
the
whole way through.
It makes me think so strongly of the sea listening to it.
When I came to Madeira, it had never seemed possible that such an idea could enter my mind, or that this life could bring me any happiness. I thank God always that I was brought here. When I came away in July, I did not think happiness possible for me. And indeed, I had not begun even to wish for it.
Gradually, I think it makes sense for that to retreat, for the text and the speaking to be less prominent. So it's sort of in focus at the start, and then ideally, if I'm rewriting this piece, I would have less of the spoken text perhaps, and it's more just popping in at different places just to recalibrate and to point out new sections, but actually trying to get that balance between the speech and the playing was quite difficult. And again, I was only really able to evaluate that at the point that it was first performed.
I cannot write more just now. But I send this because I do not wish a mail, now on the point of leaving, to go without bringing the good news.
But what did you think? Why did you choose those excerpts? And are there bits that you like most about as a player, but also having heard it?
The opening I chose because it would offset the opening of the original, and because they're quite different. There's the same material, but they're really different excerpts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you did that.
Because I like the idea of that's just a favourite sort of texture of mine. But also the experience of writing the context of writing for the two modern horns and their capability to do more chromatic sort of noodling and weaving was something that was available to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was really effective, but I liked the idea of the natural horn sort of smearing between sound and pitches against the more pure sound of the modern horns.
You could really separate the two sounds because of the way that you did that. Like you could clearly hear, and it was the natural horn moving.
Yeah. And the potential to smear things and to blend things is something which is an opportunity in that medium. When you have things which are from instruments of the same sort, then there's that opportunity or the affordance to do a lot of smearing and blending and to make these composite sounds.
Yeah.
I was trying to do that. I mean, I'm still evaluating how successful I was, but that's certainly something that I set out to do. Yeah.
And the second excerpt, again, it echoes one of the first excerpts, but it shows off the range of the instrument.
Yes.
It's a 3-octave range within 3 beats at one point, which is quite fun.
And there's a catharsis as well, isn't there, for all of that pent up tension? Then it kind of just relaxes to open up.
Yeah. And then also the multiphonics, which were in the middle then of the modern horns playing. And it's interesting. I don't know if you could hear them so much on just there, but you can really, coming out of speakers, you can really hear the different sounds. And it's quite mysterious because it's just in the middle, sort of floating and move, and you can't really. It's quite hard to pinpoint what's happening, but you can hear something is going on. So, yeah.
And those effects are sometimes things which I may not have consciously anticipated at the point of writing, but then I'm very pleased to find are there. And I suppose I have tended to write things in a way that I hope things like that will happen.
Your ever affectionate brother, William Thomson.
So I can say right now, the point of what I was trying to do there in that was to think a little bit more about ways of writing that I think really are compatible with the horn, or my idea of what I think is compatible for the horn and the ensemble. And also there, I don't have the speaker anymore. I wanted to see what it was like to write for the full quartet.
I like the low hand stopping where it's not the pure interval as well. Just to really disrupt, it just disrupts the feel of it, and then ends on a kind of back onto the in tune fingering.
Well, I think the reason we did that, you had suggested that, hadn't you? And it was, you wanted to have that reference back to version 1 and the reference to the natural horn. So, and that was very much this showing the process that we had of me showing you what I composed and then you making suggestions, and then there was definitely a back and forwards dialogue, even though it was a very contracted period of writing this particular version. It was still very much about me listening to what you thought and then writing something, and then, so it was collaborative in that sense. If you still think about it in terms of Lord Kelvin and his ship, then yeah, you have to probably have a variety of things going in there. But I was just thinking of that as a sort of a slice in like a moment and expanding on a moment in the story of that letter. So it's just really, I had this image in my mind of someone sitting, maybe even sleeping in a boat that's bobbing up and down the water, and it's just the seascape and the sound of different distant kind of bells and foghorns and nothing much going on, but just drifting.
I think without you telling us that, that's what we got from the music as well. Like when we were talking about it, that's what we were saying we thought was happening in the music. So, already.
In terms of the potential and how well I feel like I've written for the ensemble, I feel like that's the most compatible. I feel like it's very me. It's one of the things that it really resonates in terms of the way I want to be writing and who I feel like I am as a composer.
To me, it sounded like it could almost be something that then leads into something that takes the form of the second writing of Lalla Rookh, where it's got the speaker and the three horns and the natural horn. I don't know, this is like, I absolutely disagree, but somehow it feels like it's almost like an introduction to that sound world, and then I don't know if they could be combined, like the momentum that the version has when it's speaker and natural horn. It feels like that somehow they're connected, but perhaps leading to each other. But I don't know if that's something that
I think I will struggle to actually get the speaker back into a version that starts off like that. I'm happy to try it and see. I'm all for experimenting with that and to see. I could be convinced by that, but right now the way I feel is like that final version 4 would always be a quartet for modern horns. And I can start to imagine some of the what directions I could take it off to maybe spin it out to something like a 5 or 6 minute piece. And so it might flower and bloom and become much more declamatory. And you can hear also I'd woven in some of the little stepwise ascending figures that came from version 3. So it could build up in terms of texture to something much more polyphonic. But I'm not sure if I'd ever go as far as including the speaker. I think that would have to be a separate movement if I were to do it. But that's just, again, like I could be convinced if I experimented with it and actually heard it being done.
Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.